Hello, welcome to class number 5 of AP World History. My name is Jason Epand. Today we are going to go through the chapter on Mesoamerica and Oceania, what's going on in the ancient Americas and Oceania. We will also try to we'll try to start the chapter 7, the beginning of the classical era on Persia. But for right now, I want to review the two questions I asked from the last class. I asked two questions. One dealt with comparing the lives of women in Mesopotamia and in Egypt and in other areas in the ancient world. What you should say is that women had the greatest rights in Eastern Africa. They had the greatest rights in terms of opportunity to be a part of business, to supervise business, to be priestesses, to be scribes, even to be regents, pharaoh, and especially in Nubia, to be queens. Mesopotamia, great deal of subjugation. There in Mesopotamia, the main issue was inheritance, and that's why a great deal of disrespect, I shouldn't say disrespect, but the inclination of society was towards to give men the economic beneficence and women nothing. And the issue is inheritance. Men have to inherit what the family has so that the men can preserve it and allow it to blossom through their aggression and through their business acumen, and also just through the fact that men were the warriors and the ones that are going outside the community in order to establish themselves. In ancient China, women were very integral in the creation of sericulture, and silk becomes the biggest commodity coming out of China. It's going to lead explorers for hundreds and hundreds of years, for centuries, to want to go to East Asia and to revel in their silk products, etc. Women also later on, as well as porcelain and other spices. In South Asia and India, women were subjugated as well. We talked a little bit about the law book of Manu. We talked about the fact that women, even some women, were applauded for killing themselves in a form of ritualistic suicide known as sati. Where else? Women for instance, in Hebrew and Israeli societies, women were considered to be impure because of the fact that women menstruate. They are lacking the appropriate holiness to pray to Yahweh or Hashem, and thus women were subjugated as well and kept away. However, like Egyptian society, Jewish women are given certain rights, for instance, the right to name their children or the right to provide them whatever type of educational instruction they're going to have, as well as in the Jewish religion, if it's kind of different from that of the Christian religion, the woman holds the key, meaning that let's say a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, their kids, according to Jewish law, would be non-Jewish. But if a Jewish woman marries a non-Jewish man, their children would be Jewish. So it puts I guess the guys have it a little bit worse off in that case, if they intend to raise the kids Jewish, because they won't be accepted by the rabbis or the strict religious folks. Anyway, so that deals with that question. I also asked the question, why was ancient Egypt more politically stable than Mesopotamia? This should be pretty simple. Why? Because there's one pharaoh in Egypt, and this pharaoh is an absolutist. He is the authoritarian. He, or maybe she, is the authority, all right? Controlling all the land, all the slaves, all business, etc., has a huge bureaucracy and army to serve him, or her, but mostly him, right? Mesopotamia, city-states. City-states means that there are a bunch of cities, each with their own government. Well, what's going to happen? Competition. What's, competition for resources, competition for money, whatever it is, competition, right? And in Mesopotamia, this is going to lead to a variety of different ethnic groups and peoples that have control over Mesopotamia for hundreds of years or a few decades, whatever it may be, whether it's the Assyrians who reigned for a very long time, the Hittites, the New Babylonians, the Chaldeans who only ruled for 50 years. Again, that's one of the main reasons why. You've got a system of authoritarian, and not as many cities, and you've got city-states in Mesopotamia. So the very construct of itself is going to make Egypt more politically stable than that of Mesopotamia. Okay, so anyways, let's move on. At the end of last class, I talked about and defined what Mesoamerica is. I explained how people from eastern Siberia came through to North America via the Bering Strait. I mentioned the fact that North and South America you have to know this, no domesticated animals, no wheeled vehicles, and that people, us, Homo sapiens, are not indigenous or native to North and South America, okay? This takes us now we're going to be talking about the peoples of Mesoamerica. Let's talk about the variety of dynasties and empires, etc., although they don't call them that. But let's start. And where we have to start is with the Olmecs. Olmecs, capital O-L-M-E-C-S. The Olmecs are known as the rubber people. You see that in a test, rubber people. Immediately, you got to go Olmec, okay? Olmecs, they're called the rubber people because they happen to civilize themselves. They happen to create settlements near rubber trees. There you go. Olmecs were known for their elaborate complexes. They, something else, I've seen this on tests, like an SAT 2 test. I've seen this in a test where they show this sculpture of this colossal head, and they go, from which culture did this come from? And the answer is Olmec. Olmec, O-L-M-E-C. The Olmecs are known for their huge, colossal, huge heads, these sculptured heads, and it just stands out. That's what they're known for. They would create ziggurats, Z-I-G-G-U-R-A-T-S, as I explained when I talked about Mesopotamia, which are the step pyramids. They traded in jade and obsidian, O-B-S-I-D-I-A-N, okay? And the Olmecs are basically around from about 1200 BCE, and they're located around the Gulf of Mexico, although some settlements did make their way actually almost to Florida and parts of Texas. But around the Gulf of Mexico is where they're located, the rubber people, and about 400 BCE, they're sort of, well, they systematically destroyed their ceremonial centers. We're not exactly sure why, but they did around 400 BCE. The Olmecs are extremely influential to all the people that come afterwards. Maize, M-A-I-Z-E. I talked about this last class. The number one important crop you need to know about Mesoamerica, maize, M-A-I-Z-E. What is maize again? It's corn. It's very similar to corn, right? And corn, how important is that? In everything that, you know, corn syrup, corn's everywhere. Can't fight the corn. Ceremonial centers. The Olmecs are important in calendars. The Olmecs are important in the ball game that becomes a chief part of a certain society. It's coming up next. And then, of course, Olmecs are famous for something which, when we think about Mesoamerican societies, we love to, we love the human sacrifice. That's right, that's right. They are very well known for human sacrifice. Just to explain, and the variety of people that come afterwards also like to do the human sacrifice. And what they did was that they did something called bloodletting. And if you could see my ribs right here in the bottom of my ribs, they would cut right around here, and then they'd probably hang you upside down, and your entrails and blood and everything would fall to the ground. Why? Why? Why do they kill these people? The reason for it is because the blood is sort of a gift to the god of the soil and the god who can provide rain. So as we are killing ourselves for the earth, so then maybe this great spirit above can provide precipitation in order for our crops to grow. So those are the Olmecs. Let's now go through the descendants of the Olmecs, right? The people who the Olmecs greatly influenced. The first and most famous, maybe, are the Mayans, M-A-Y-A-N, the Mayans, okay? The Mayans lived in the highlands of Guatemala, okay? And they were also involved in maize, but they also helped grow cotton and cacao. Cotton we know about. Cotton was also found in India and a bit in Egypt, all right? But cacao. Cacao is the basis for, you know, the coffee bean. And what's so special about cacao, C-A-C-A-O, is that it can be used as both something that you eat and also something which is a stimulant and something that you can trade. So it has all those three things. I've seen this on tests before, just the importance of this product, that it's used as a stimulant, you know, speed things up, right? It's also used, you know, caffeine. It's also used in terms of, you know, for coffee and a little bit for chocolate, dark chocolate, and also for it's traded as a good. It's a commodity. It's a commodity. And so it has all three of those values, which is, you know, I guess you could say important. In terms of Mayans, their capital, or their most famous city, was called Tikal, T-I-K-A-L, and this was their political center from about 300 to 900 of the Common Era. The Mayans are very well known. They're warriors. They're very much warriors, okay? Warriors have prestige. The society worships this warrior clan, this warrior ideal, okay? People who are caught by the Mayans become captives. They can become slaves or they become victims. However, the Mayans don't treat people as badly as another group that we'll talk about later, okay? The Mayans tend to, more than the other group, offer them a bit of, you could say, political sovereignty, as long as they pay a great deal in terms of taxes and tributes and stuff like that. The most famous, I would say, spiritual center of the Mayans is called Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza, C-H-I-C-H-E-N, Itza, capital I-T-Z-A. Chichen Itza, I've been there actually. Chichen Itza is accessible via Cancun. If you go to Cancun, Mexico, there are, you know, all sorts of trips, so you can go down to Chichen Itza. But don't go on a crazy trip. You'll end up like those teenagers in Scott Smith's book, The Ruins, which was turned into an okay movie. Not a great movie, but Good book. By 800 CE, the Mayans begin to desert their cities and society begins to go down, down, down. Now, as far as Mayan society is, it's very much hierarchical. I talked about the kings and priests are at the top, and then everybody goes down from there. In terms of other important aspects of the Mayans, you need to know their calendar. Their calendar is very important. They're very into astronomy, and their calendar did a great job of integrating social and ritual aspects into one calendar. Okay, so based on where the sun is, depends on what type of ritual. They all were interwoven together. Mayan writing, it was ideographic, means it had characters, and it was syllabic. There were syllables. Okay, unfortunately, only 4 books survive. That's not a lot. So I don't know if that's because that they were destroyed or because the Mayans didn't write a lot. Who knows? But there were only 4 books that survived. In terms of their religious thought, I mentioned Chichen Itza as their sort of religious center, their spiritual center. Mayans had a very special creation myth. This creation myth is called the Popol Vuh, capital P-O-P-U-L, or no, P-O-P-O-L, Popol Vuh, capital V-U-H, P-O-P-O-L, capital V-U-H. Popol Vuh is a Mayan creation myth that says that we, us, Homo sapiens, are created out of water, which makes sense to me, and maize. Yeah, so we're a combination of water and corn and nothing else. Hey, whatever. Obviously, the human sacrificing continues throughout the Mayan era because God, their spiritual God, maintains an agricultural cycle based on the idea of water and bloodletting and stuff like that. And the Mayan ball game, it's the gambling involved in it, the religious significance, the superstitions, sporting elements of it, very important within Mayan society. Next group, another era of the Olmecs are the Teotihuacans. The Teotihuacans, capital T-E-O-T-I-H-U-A-C-A-N. The Teotihuacans come around the same time as, a little bit, and it would say anywhere from like 800 to, I'm sorry. Rather, we should say in between 400 and 600 of the Common Era. All right, 400 to 600. The Mayans begin to go down around 900, 950 is when their societies begin to okay, but 400 to 600 is the high point of the Teotihuacans. The Teotihuacans are located in the highlands of Mexico, and what they're mainly known for are these enormous, colossal, reasonably flat pyramids, and which represent the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon. And if you see pictures of them, they're so wide and expansive. When it comes to the paintings and murals, a lot of them show off priests and rulers, but really priests. They very much dominate society and dominate the Teotihuacan. They're shown quite a bit in the artistic representations of the Teotihuacan. These artisans and artists were famous for using obsidian, O-B-S-I-D-I-A-N, tools, and the Teotihuacans also created a famous type of orange pottery, which is still respected today. One major difference between the Mayans and a little bit of the Olmecs, but the Mayans and the Teotihuacan, is that the Teotihuacan were not military. They weren't involved. They weren't a militaristic society. They were not a militaristic society. People, 2/3 of the city would be peasants throughout the day, and there's no sign of society being militaristic. There's no sign of any type of them conquesting or expanding their territory and inserting themselves with other people. It wasn't part of the thing. As we mentioned before, same type of thing in the Olmecs. You got the ball game, you've got the human sacrifices, similar type of thing. The Teotihuacans began to go downhill around 650 CE. Their own society was sacked and destroyed by the mid-8th century by a variety of nomadic groups. Okay? So that's really what's going on in Mesoamerica through, you would say, the first millennium of the Common Era. We're going to talk about what's going on with other Mesoamerican groups in a later chapter. Those people would include the Toltecs and the Aztecs. I'm sure maybe you've heard of the Aztecs. The Aztecs are the Mexica people. You ever think of why we call it Mexico? It's called Mexico because of the Mexica people, M-E-X-I-C-A, which are the Aztecs. Anyways, but that's for a later chapter. Let's move on now. Let's move on down south to Sur de Americana, South America, all right? When it comes to early South American societies, they're mostly based around the Peru and Bolivian regions, which are located, you would say, in northwestern South America. Now you may ask yourself, why are they in Peru and Bolivia? Well, the reason is because they're located within the Andes Mountains. for whatever reason, a great deal of societies developed within Andean. They were called early Andean societies, A-N-D-E-A-N, early Andean society. Okay? As I mentioned before in last class, about 12,000 BCE, people had reached South America, and by 8,000, they were experimenting with agriculture. Okay? And it took a long period of time, but really around 1000 BCE, there is evidence of some type of sophisticated complex society in South America. Okay? The main crops in South America, well, similar to that in Mesoamerica, you've got beans, you've got sweet potatoes, a little bit of cotton. But one difference is that South America had peanuts. Peanuts were something from South America that was more there than you would say in Mesoamerica. There is also a little bit more fishing, especially with a group of people that were around from 900 to 300 BCE in this Andean society. This group is called the Chavan Cult, the Chavan Cult. C-H-A-V-I-N, the Chavan Cult. The Chavan Cult is named after an individual, and they base their society around his teachings, etc., etc. It's called a cult because it wasn't a firm, organized religion, and it, I guess, it fit the parameters of what a cult is. Okay, they were when it comes to the Chavan Cult, they were the first people that we really see within this geographical area who were building fishing nets and who were using cotton textiles and stuff like that. They also were involved in gold, silver, and copper metallurgy, finding the materials and creating a certain type of jewelry, etc., etc. However, what we do know about early South American society is that there was no writing. Really no instances of writing, so there's really no books or anything like that that we know of. How do we know this material then? Well, just from people who came after the Andean societies, etc., a certain type of excavations, archaeological, etc., etc. Okay, early Andean states, one more I'm going to mention after the Chavan Cult, and it's called Mo-Chica. Mo-Chica is from 300 to 700 CE. Again, they have a tradition of irrigation, a tradition of military, but no writing system. No writing system. And the Mo-Chica are known for their work with ceramics and pottery and stuff like that. Okay, so that takes us to South America. We'll come back to South America, obviously, in a later chapter to discuss the Incas and the development of the Eugenio sugar plantation systems. But for now, let's go on to Oceania. You may say to yourself, well, in the United States, I'm taught that Australia is the capital. Well, and that was the education at least I received. Yes, I'm American. I was about to qualify proud. I was going to sing Proud to be an American song, but I don't think people want to hear that. But anyways, in Oceania, Oceania comprises of Australia, comprises of New Zealand, comprises of Papua New Guinea, Micronesia, Polynesia, etc., etc. Okay, so the continent is called Oceania. So let's talk about the very beginnings of it, okay? We know that certain types of people, like us, kind of, yeah, were in Australia and New Guinea at least 60,000 years ago. And Australia and New Guinea used to be attached to one another. They used to really be attached to one another, all right? But what happened was, about 10,000 years ago, rising seas separated Australia and New Guinea. And you may think to yourself, well, Australia is a much, much larger landmass, so obviously everyone went over to Australia and had a great old time. No, no. People stayed on the New Guinea side. In Australia, goodness, do you realize that Australia was a hunter and gathering society until the early 19th century? I mean, it's true. Australia, up until about 180 years ago, 200 years ago, the people there, the Aboriginal people, were hunter and gatherers. They weren't even they weren't into agriculture and stuff like that. That's amazing that a place like Australia today, that we think of all of these cities, even 200 years ago, it was a great big expanse of, you know, nothingness and random, I should say, nothing in terms of, you know, a greater, larger, complex society, and it was just filled with individuals living off the land and having complete peace with themselves. However, people stayed on New Guinea, and around 3000 BCE, New Guinea started turning to agriculture. The people that live in New Guinea now are being called the Austronesians. The Austronesians, A-U-S-T-R-O-N-E-S-I-A-N. The Austronesians begin to migrate out to a variety of other small islands that exist outside of Papua New Guinea. There is a certain change. First, you have Micronesia. Micronesia is the area which is a bit closer to Indonesia, and then you have Polynesia, which is heading a bit south and further east. And Polynesia is made up of certain places like, you know, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, etc., etc., etc. Okay? How are they getting to these places? Via outrigger canoes. Outrigger canoes are taking them from place to place. One thing I want to mention is that the reason why a lot of these smaller islands become inhabited is because, let's say you've got a group of people on a certain landmass and they're not getting along. They start warring with each other. The loser of those battles would then be forced to move off of the land and would have to find a new place to live. And thus, what you have is an entire society of people being pushed onto a boat or being put on a boat, and now they need to find a new place. And what you have is island, island, island. As you can tell, it's like a domino effect. And over time, all of these islands are becoming, not all of them, but some of them are being inhabited by people. All right. Let's talk about one particular society that was it was you should say an extended society from New Guinea all the way to Tonga, and that's the Lapita Society, capital L-A-P-I-T-A Society. And this society is around from 1500 to 500 BCE. Okay, very much agricultural villages. They're known for their pottery that contains a great deal of geometric designs. Okay, they work with obsidian, they work with shells, they work with a variety of tools as well. Okay, but around 500 BCE, the trade network lowers. I guess business is not as good as it once was, and this leads to a greater amount of chaos and fighting, and then this sort of domino effect, the rippling effect I talked about before, with all of these other islands being inhabited by people starts taking place. Okay, within their society, in the Lapita Society, the chiefs themselves were looked upon as being divine or semi-divine, and rarely would they ever give up. It's not like a democracy where they leave after a few years. No, they are chief for life. They lead public rituals and they oversee the irrigation. And like many other ancient societies, irrigation is the bedrock upon which all agricultural societies exist. And we're going to talk about the great aspect of what the next group of people in the next chapter did in terms of irrigation in just a moment. That brings us to the end of chapter 6. As we are ending chapter 6, we are ending the pre-classical period in world history. We're now moving to the classical era of world history, and this is the beginning of chapter 7, which can be called Persia. Persia, okay? Let's begin as far as Persia goes, okay? Who makes up Persia? Where is Persia? Well, hopefully you know today that when we talk about Persia, we're talking about the country of Iran, I-R-A-N. Iranians are Persians, okay? Now, if you have friends or you know people who are Persians, please do not call them Arabs. Persians, Iranians are not Arabs. They are not from the Arabian Sea, all right? Their background is not, they're not the Bedouin people, or the Bedouin people. Bedouin, I almost mispronounced it. B-E-D-O-U-I-N, all right? They're not the Bedouin people, okay? Instead, what you have, the Persians or I should say Iranians, are a mixture of certain ethnic groups, be it the Persians or be it the Medes, M-E-D-E-S, two different groups that migrated from Central Asia to the land of Persia sometime before 1000 BCE, all right? They're all, these people, these Persians and these Medes are all Indo-Europeans, and they share cultural traits with the other Indo-Europeans like the Aryans that we spoke about earlier. Okay? When they're in this area, they begin to challenge the rulers, the Assyrians and the Babylonians at this time. Okay? And from this, you have the beginning of the great Persian Empire. We're now going to go through the rulers of the Persian Empire and take it to when they reached their peak and then how they came a bit down. Okay? So first, the rise. And the rise of the Persian Empire starts with Cyrus. Cyrus the Achaemenid. Achaemenid. That's the type of group they were. They were the Achaemenids. A-C-H-A-E-M-E-N-I-D, the Achaemenids. And Cyrus ruled from 558 to 530 BCE, okay? Cyrus was the king of all the Persian tribes, and what he organized from a militaristic standpoint is this awesome cavalry, okay? You have men on horses, because remember, they're Indo-Europeans, so they're very familiar with horses, and they're all equipped with these bows and arrows, and they're just this awesome army. And what he does is he takes all the land made up of Iran under his control by 548 BCE, and by the time he dies in 530, the Persian Empire goes all the way from the borders of India to the borders of Egypt. I mean, that's an enormous amount of land that's all part of the Persian Empire. But Cyrus is dead. His son, Cambyses, C-A-M-B-Y-S-E-S, who rules from 530 to 522, his great achievement is that he conquered Egypt. He conquered Egypt. So Cyrus took you from the borders of India to the borders of Egypt, and then Cambyses, his son, conquered Egypt. But the peak and the largest extent of the Persian Empire is Darius, capital D-A-R-I-U-S, Darius, okay? Darius ruled over an empire that had approximately 35 million people. Now today, obviously, that sum doesn't appear to be that awesome. But 35 million people, that's a lot back in ancient, even in classical times. That's a real lot of people, okay? Now, when you're ruling over 35 million people and you're ruling over all this land, obviously then you're going to be ruling over lots of different types of ethnic people. In fact, there were over 70 ethnicities in the Persian Empire. 70 ethnicities, all right? When you've got 70 ethnicities, how are you going to succeed as an empire and make it so that all these ethnicities are getting along with one another, that there's not chaos, there's not fragmentation, which is going to lead to a rotting of the society at the core? The way they did this is through a remarkable blend of tolerance. Tolerance was very, very important to the Persian success. In fact, tolerance is a very important aspect of any successful society, okay? But tolerance was very important to Persian success because you have so many ethnicities, and thus, because of the fact that the monarchs respected the traditions of all of these ethnicities, society blossomed, all right? Tolerance and also the administration of the Achaemenids. The Achaemenids were known for their awesome administration, all right, their awesome bureaucracy, because they did things a bit different than most other people. Let me give you an example. What the king, the monarch, did is that, and you could say Darius was involved in this, is that he created basically 23 different regions within his empire. And each of these regions would have a governor that would be appointed by the king. But then underneath the governor, in each region, the local government would be made up of representatives from that particular area. So the governor is chosen by the king, and the representatives in the government under the governor is from the local population, okay? How do you maintain control over the governor? Because it's decentralized. So how does the king, someone like Darius, make sure that someone in a region is obeying him? Well, what he did is he used the secret spy program. He sent representatives to the regions, anonymously, and they were supposed to, act like the spy, right? And make sure that the governor is abiding by the policies of the central government. Another aspect of the Achaemenid administration, which led to stability, is their taxation system. Previously, many other people within the Mesopotamian society used to extract tributes, and the tributes were irregular, they were unpredictable, and who knows, they would fluctuate. What the Achaemenid administration did is it provided a sort of, a taxation rate, or a certain amount that each region knows it needs to provide the central government by the end of a certain amount of time. Okay? This is good. Why? Because it leads to stability. It leads to dependability, something that people can rely on, and that's really awesome. Another aspect about Persian society that made it so comfortable and what made it so successful was that all coins and all laws were standardized. And also, Darius made sure that certain roads, for instance, the famous Persian Royal Road, were constructed, were created, were paved so that there would be routes, and there would be routes to go on so people, traders and travelers and merchants can travel these routes and get from area to area to area. Besides, when you create official royal roads, you're also creating a safer way to travel, okay? A safer way to travel as well, where bandits and other sort of miscreants, malfeasors, all these SAT words, can exploit these dear people. Okay, so I've talked about the great glory of the Persian Empire, and I talked about its magnificence in terms of its sort of unique aspects with its administration and tolerance and how much land it conquered. Unfortunately, as we know, empires are not, they don't always stay on top. They always decline and fall. And I know you're just begging and you're sitting on the edge of your seat. Your pencil is just really tense because you want to find out exactly how it is and why it is they failed. But unfortunately, you're going to have to wait till next class because we reached the end of this session, okay? Thank you very much for listening. Next class, we're going to finish the Persian Empire, and then we're going to go on to Chapter 8, which deals with classical China and our friends. We're going to learn about social and political orders and our friends, the Qin and the... we're not going to get to all of the Qin and the Han, but we'll get to some of it. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the next class. Take care. Bye-bye.